Hello, everyone. Today we are together with Dr. Naveed Sherwani, and we will talk about the semiconductor business amid the trade tensions. Mr. Sherwani, could you please introduce yourself a little bit about your background and to let the audience know more about yourself?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's an important topic to discuss and understand various different perspectives. I am a long-term career in semiconductors, started in mid-80s, where after my PhD, I became a professor for the next 10 years. I was a professor, mostly focusing on design and automation of chip design. And after that, I joined Intel and I worked for Intel for 10 years. Again, mostly working on how do we automate chip design. And then in the last 22 years, I have been an entrepreneur. I have started many semiconductor companies, around 21 or 22 of them. And they're all on various different types of chip designs. Most of them are in US, some of them are in China. We also started companies in other countries, in Korea and others as well. So several companies have been created in several countries over the last 22, 23 years. So my career has been sort of a professor, then working for a large company in semiconductor, and then an entrepreneur starting many companies.
Especially since last year, you have witnessed too many trade tensions in the semiconductor export controls issues. And we know that the BIS has recently released a new set of rules targeting the chip markets. And they updated the rules of the October 2022, which were targeting the chip manufacturing equipment. Now it's the turn of the semiconductor business. So I would like to ask you a question. The trade tensions have been a significant concern in the semiconductor industry. How do you see these tensions evolving, and what are the potential consequences for the global supply chain?
So, first of all, it's important to understand that different industries work differently, right? For example, food industry. If you think about that, every nation grows their own food. Most of them actually do, and it's not entangled. It's not like if Turkey's food production depends on Syria or Egypt's food production. Most of the time, most of the material that is needed for food production, fertilizers, things like that, are large countries have their own. So they're really not dependent on others. But small countries do depend on that, right? So that's how food production works. Semiconductor was not set up like that. Set up when it started in 50s and 60s, we quickly understood that the most important thing about semiconductors is that we have to lower the cost and increase the performance every year. The so-called Moore's law. That became the battle cry. In fact, the only value semiconductors have today is because every year we can make it cheaper, better, cheaper, better. This is the reason potentially everybody could afford a laptop, cell phone, and things like that, because we had this attitude that we want to make it lower cost and better performance every year. Well, that required collaboration of 70, 80 different countries.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that so? Because some countries make material, some countries make equipment, some countries have people, talent who actually do the design. Some countries have the low cost structure, we can do the manufacturing. Some countries have low cost structure so that we can do processing of materials. So it was set up as a global supply chain, truly global supply chain, to optimize one thing, cost. Why? Because we felt that the only value we can provide to humanity is to provide electronics and technology, which is underpinning every aspect of society now at lower cost. And in that sense, it uplifts society all over the world, right? Because it uplifts poor people, gives them a technology leap, a chance to participate in global economy, and uplifts. So in this backdrop where 70 countries are involved and intermingled, very highly intermingled. So as a result, even if United States or China or any other country decides that I will produce my own semiconductors, we believe it is impossible today for them to do so. So in this, first of all, you have to have this perspective that unlike other industries, many industries in which semiconductor is a very difficult industry to disentangle, the way it was set up. So for example, China has many materials, has low cost structure to do manufacturing. They simply do not have the design talent. United States has a lot of design talents, a lot of innovative people who can do a lot of design, things like that, simply do not have the cost structure to manufacture or process materials. African countries have raw materials. They come. Japan has a processing capability. Korea, Taiwan have the structure so that they can actually, they do not have any materials. They do not have any raw material processing capability, but they mostly have factories where we can build these semiconductors. They do design, but not as much. So you see, if you look at it, in just one sentence, I could mention 10 countries that are essential. But if you look at the supply chain, it is more like 70 countries. So now, given this backdrop that 70 countries are entangled into this situation, now you put trade tensions. So what is a trade tension? Now, if one country or 2 or 10 countries say that, okay, we are not going to let other country use some of the equipment that we make, or some of the materials that we have, or some of the talent that we have, we are not going to make it accessible to other people. What does it do to this whole scenario? What it does is that, first of all, it shocks the supply chain. And eventually, as you start to decouple, the cost of semiconductors will go up. Because right now, we source everything from the lowest place. And then what has happened, because we source it from the lowest place, and because the industry is not that big, eventually, all has happened is that only 1 or 2 suppliers have survived in each aspect of this design. Why? Because in semiconductors, we need extreme precision. For example, most of the material that we source are required to be pure to the range of 99.99999, 5 nines after the dot, % pure. The number of people alive in this world who understand what it means to produce something this pure is very few. The number of factories which are available in the world to do that is sometimes 1 factory, sometimes 2 factories. That's it. So if that factory or both of factories happen to be this one country, then what do you do? And why it has happened like that? It has happened like that because the industry is not that big. While it has a huge impact, you do not need that much xenon gas. We need xenon gas. It is produced by only 2 or 3 companies in countries in the world, or companies in the world, and those factories produce 90%, 95%. Now, if you have trade tensions and that one country or that one company is unable to participate, now you will have to build up another factory of xenon gas somewhere else. But how many people will you supply? And would you be able to produce it at 99.9999% purity? And if you did that for every element of 200-300 elements needed, you can clearly see that you will be creating many suboptimal factories. And the net effect of that would be the cost of semiconductors will go up. Now, we believe the magic of semiconductor is in this ever decreasing cost, ever increasing performance. Once you take that away, maybe semiconductors will not be as magical. If the cell phone was available at $20,000 per piece, would that be magical? If laptop was available at $15,000 or $30,000 per piece, would that be magical? Would not be magical. It is magical because you can buy a cell phone, low-end cell phone, probably even in $20, $30. And see, so our perspective, my perspective, expert perspective of most experts in this area is the magic of semiconductor is in ever decreasing cost, making it available to wider and wider set of people, expanding its impact on all the different sides of economy all over the world, and we are. But this will stop if we disrupt the supply chain. It will stop if the countries stop, collaborating with each other, and this global combination of 70, 80 countries which are working together. If they don't work together, you can still make semiconductors. Don't get me wrong, it's possible, but you will make them at a much higher cost, very less capability, and maybe this innovation cycle that we have going on will also slow down or take a pause. So that is generally our concern, is that the trade tensions directly lead to increase of cost, maybe to a point where it disrupts the cycle, maybe to a point where it makes it a very non-innovative or non-attractive industry for young people to join, and they turn away and then they do something else, and it becomes like defense industry or nuclear industry, which is there, extremely expensive, not making useful products that everybody can use, and having a direct impact on everybody's life on a daily basis. Look at nuclear technology. In 60s and 70s, there was a global collaboration. You could actually buy a nuclear reactor if you want from any country. Slowly, as the countries realized that it has the war potential or weapons potential, the industry closed up. By 1980s, the industry had become like defense industry. Whoever can make it wants to make better than the others, but not share anything with no collaboration. Look at that, which it left nuclear industry. Nuclear industry, which is potentially the cleanest source of energy known to humankind, went into the background, plays very or no role in this whole carbon situation that we have, and we are going towards wind, solar, all lot more polluting, lot more difficult things to do at scale than nuclear. But we would not be able to do nuclear because it went into that behind the closed door, no collaboration, a situation in 1980s. We are afraid semiconductor might go there, and if it goes there, humanity would have missed a huge opportunity, that the good that this technology can do.
So I do have a question. How do you see the semiconductor industry contributing to the broader technological landscape and innovation in the coming years?
Well, if you think about, we are going from an era where, in every era, there is something that drives that era. Our last era probably was era of oil, and oil drove the economy worldwide. The next era that we are in is an era of data and artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Any country, company, individual, nation who has ability to use data and use AI on the data to find trends, find methods to deploy that data for the benefit of its employees or citizens, that nation will do much better than other nations. So the heart of the trade tension is based on three technologies actually. 5G, because that allows individual elements to touch the cloud, sensors and machines and people. Second, which is called edge intelligence, meaning all the sensors and things that are putting data into the cloud become intelligent. And the third, the ability to combine all this data into end-to-end supply chain and connecting companies, regions, nations into a single digital network that can bring extreme efficiency to that nation, extreme efficiency to that company. You can, experts differ on the number, but let's say a nation can get 5 to 7% productivity boost. A nation that has 5G, nation that has deployed the intelligence on every machine, every person, every cell phone, every truck, every car, everything in your nation is giving data to the cloud, connecting the data so that your supply chains are very efficient. Think about that. A truck does not offload a container in a factory unless that the container is needed. Container is not opened in a factory until the factory machines are ready. machines do the same thing. The output, it does the same thing. People don't show up on the work until the machine is ready and the raw material is present. Imagine doing that across the entire nation. That nation would be highly efficient. That is what the future is. Now, if you look at that, early elements of data collection, semiconductors are needed. AI, artificial intelligence, and edge nodes, semiconductors are needed. Getting data, sensors, cameras, all kind of different sensors. Then all the kinds of machines that you need, each machine in the world has some semiconductor in it today. It is not possible to make a machine. You can even make a chair these days without semiconductors because the way they are made in factories. So without semiconductors, literally you cannot make anything. There is no aspect of economy, there is no aspect of our life is not touched by semiconductors. And with the advent of data and AI, they will become even more important. And finally, the nations, the companies who have the ability to set up data centers, aggregate the data, analyze the data, and then use the data to push themselves ahead will have a leg up on everybody else. So semiconductors not only play a huge role today in every aspect of society, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, they will become dominant, meaning if your country, if your company, if your team does not have access to semiconductors, do not understand how to use semiconductors, you will be left behind. You will be left behind by a large margin. And this is reason behind the trade war, that nations feel that if we are not able to execute this plan that I'm talking about, their nation, their team, their company is going to be left behind. And the other company, country, people will have such an unassailable lead that we will be unable to catch up with them. So that is how I see semiconductors affecting life today, affecting nations today, and going forward, they will become probably the most important commodity on planet Earth.
So given the ever-increasing demand for the semiconductors, what do you think about the industry? How is industry working to address the potential shortages and the bottlenecks in the production?
Actually, semiconductor industry, unlike many other industries, is a cyclical industry. What does it mean? We can add capacity only in big chunks. So what happens that you will see an industry, let's say you're in year 0 and demand and supply is perfectly matched. What happens that we don't add capacity in the system. Why? Because it's very expensive. So what we do is we let the demand increase and create a shortage of supply deliberately. And then when shortage reaches a certain threshold, then we add capacity. But when we add the capacity, we don't add the capacity to meet the shortage. We add the capacity 2-3 times the shortage, so that for next few years, we can address additional shortages of the future. Then what happens? For the next year, now you have too much supply, right? Because you build capacity more. And why do we do that? It's not possible to build small incremental factories in semiconductors. We have to build gigantic factories because the only way you can make semiconductors cheap is to build huge capacity. So this means every year, every few years, 3 years, 4 years, there would be oversupply. And every 3-4 years again, there will be shortage. Now, people who are not used to this cycle, people who are not from this industry, they get panicked when there is shortage. We are not. And they also panic when there is oversupply. We are used to it. So I've been in this industry 40 years. I've seen these cycles many times. I consider these cycles to be okay. Because if you can add capacity only in large chunks and you cannot add small capacity, you cannot incrementally solve the shortage and the oversupply problem. So it is the inherent nature of our industry that we will have shortage cycles and we will have oversupply cycles. And people in our industry are used to it. Now, because it was global in nature, we could address it. But if you break the industry in 5 or let's say the world divides and there are 3 or 4 clubs, semiconductor clubs. Now this situation becomes very bad because now one club may be having a shortage cycle, one club may be having oversupply, but they're not willing to share. They're not willing to supply each other, which they were willing to do before. So it was less problem. Plus, if you're not willing to sell commodities, materials, equipment, factories to each other, then what happens? Not the shortest and oversupply cycles. There will be not one cycle, multiple cycles in multiple clubs, because there are 5 clubs now or 4 clubs. Each is going through their own cycle. But because there's no collaboration and sharing, they can potentially become very bad. It could be that USA is having a huge shortage of auto parts and China has lots of auto parts, but they are not willing to sell to United States. Some countries in Africa has huge amount of cobalt or zinc, but they have mines have good production. They have backlog of all these materials, but they're not willing to sell to Japan. Japan has a lot of capacity to process those materials, but they have no raw material. So you can see that trade tensions can make the shortages and supply cycles much, much worse than they are today. We are used to the current cycle. We think it is okay. But if you divide the world in 3, 4 clubs, then I can clearly see that these cycles can become not only worse, they can actually become quite disruptive.
So I understand that the semiconductors business will be evolving with its dynamics, but there is like something like a chicken and eggs effect, that it's controlled because of the security reasons for the US and for the China, and the security is also a concern in that. So what are the implications of the implications for the semiconductor industry? I want to ask about the security and the data protection issues, particularly regarding the development and export of supercomputing technology. Where do they stand?
Well, actually, we should all be very concerned about the data security, because if the nation or your company is run by data, then your country can be disrupted if somewhere. I mean, just look at on the issue of elections. If a nation's election can be affected by other people outside that nation by manipulating the data, opinion polls or something, that is very disruptive, right? For example, yesterday in US, all the companies which register land and property land leases, they got attacked, and most 2 major companies were shut down. Yesterday, people who have bought the houses cannot register their leases. The whole system was shut down. I don't know if it's back up yesterday. Several of my friends who had bought property or there were transactions are in the middle, all just because they were a major security hack. Now, that's on one side. Second, we are worried about data, how it impacts AI models. That's a very disruptive thing. For example, if there is a data in US, China, or Europe, in somebody who doesn't like Turkey and has the ability to modify data or feed the data to the models, which is sort of anti-Turkey. If you have enough influence, if you are Google, if you are Amazon, if you are Alibaba, these companies have reached a point where they have data sets which can start impacting the model itself. It's possible to create an anti-Turkish sentiment in Europe by manipulating the data. Now, of course, Turkey should be very concerned about that. Yeah. And in fact, Europe should be very concerned about that, because Europe nation would not like to have anti-Turkish sentiment in their people for no reason, except that one company who has an influence over the data, like Facebook, like Google, like Microsoft, potentially, if some people inside are anti-Turkey, they could do that. So data security for economic reasons, data security for national reasons, I believe is very important. Now, in future, it will become even more important. because we will be fed by AI models on everything. You're already being fed. If you use something like ChatGPT for writing your memos or emails, your memos, emails are already tainted by a model, and you may not even know it. It may have a certain bias in that, and it might be excluding certain people, certain opinions, certain things. People use these kind of models every day. Billions of people are using it without knowing that this data is, for example, social media feeds. The news that you see is completely determined by AI. You do not see the news as they happen in the world. For every news in the world, there are 2 or 3 perspectives. Let's take the example of Israel-Gaza war. For every video that shows that Israel is committing atrocities, there is another video that shows Hamas did something bad. So what videos are you going to show, you or me? It depends the news feed that is generating those videos. So if I just get one kind of videos, I'm likely to start getting an opinion over time that maybe this party is the bad one, right? So I think all of us should be very worried about how data is controlled, how data is manipulated, how data is fed to us. I believe this is the way. Now, at the nation's level, it is even worse. Security of your nation, the defense of Turkey, defense of China, defense of US depends on these countries being able to control their defense infrastructure. There are many defense missiles, tanks, mobile infrastructure, communication infrastructure. All those infrastructure are basically run by semiconductors. If some other nation disrupts that, then your country can become very weak. You don't want that situation. So sometimes you could have an advantage, or you can, in a war or a battle with other country, not because you have better weapons, it's because you have better electronics to jam their system or disable their systems. Now it's even worse because a lot of those things are done through satellites, right? Well, what happens if you disrupt the satellites? That's where the data comes and goes, and you gather intelligence. So you could go in a complete darkness. So should nations worry about impact of semiconductors on their defense? Absolutely. I do not blame a single nation. And if you are not worried, you should be worried. I think if Turkey is not worried, they should be worried. I think US should be worried. US is worried. China is worried that what happens if some other nation can disrupt our data, disrupt our defense systems, then we'll be in the black. We can't see anything. Our satellites won't feed us any data. Our radars will be jammed. Our aircraft will be jammed. Our guns will not operate. What will happen to us? I think these are legitimate concerns. So as a result, every nation would like to guarantee the chips and software they have is not hacked, is not hackable. So the chips that we have don't have some secret situation in them that other nation that they're buying it from has put some kind of a stuff in it that they can disable those chips, disable those systems, disable that software. So first point is, should nations worry about data security? Should companies worry about that? Should individuals worry about that? I say absolutely. It is already affecting our life. In 5 years, it will affect our life. We will not able to do anything without somebody feeding us something, and that change our opinion, change our economic well-being, change our health well-being. And as a result, I think we should all worry about it.
So what about the collaboration of the businesses and the governments?
So the darkest future is that it becomes like defense industry, where countries come to a conclusion, yes, it has a lot of beneficial side, but it is too dangerous. We just cannot allow our people to use this technology, other people to use this technology. Is just too dangerous. Defense is there, right? There is no collaboration between countries to develop next generation fighter aircraft. There's no collaboration between countries to develop next generation aircraft carriers, right? Why? Because they think that such collaboration might give that country an advantage. And today we are friends, but what happens tomorrow? We become enemies. Now you have unknowingly weaponized your enemy. So United States, China, other countries develop their own weapons, but they don't share that knowledge with anybody because they don't know that who will be our friend or enemy tomorrow. So the darkest future of semiconductor is that it becomes like a defense technology. Every nation develops their own. But unlike defense technology, semiconductor is not possible to do that. So what will happen in semiconductor is that every nation will try to do that. They will not be able to do that. But what they try to do is to get enough cards on the table so they can play the card. So for example, United States has a lead in making high-end chips. So what China is doing is to get a lead on making low-end chips. Because you cannot make a system with just a high-end chips. You on the boards and systems, you need few high-end chips, but lot of low-end chips. Let's say 3 years from now, US has a complete control of high-end chips, and China has a complete control of low-end chips. No country can go any without working with each other. I believe this is where it is going. Every nation is trying to figure out what can I control, where can I get a leg up, so that I have enough cards to play on the table. So then China will say, okay, I will give you low-end chips for this, this, and this, if you give me a high-end chip for this, this, and this. And this becomes a nation-to-nation trading, which is where it is now in many technologies, right? So that's where is the darkest future. This is not what we see in the industry. If you look at all the industry associations, we hope we don't go there. We hope for special chips, for specific aspects, there would be controls that you cannot sell these chips or this technology, but the rest of the technology remains open. Technology which is mid-tier or low-tier technology remains open. People can freely collaborate, freely share, freely go across the nation and regional boundaries, because hopefully that will keep the innovation cycle going, and hopefully that will make the semiconductors better and cheaper. That's our hope. But and that's the reason you will see, if you see GSA, SIA, SEMI, all the major semiconductor groups around the world, they are trying very hard to convince their governments in US, China, elsewhere in Europe to stay away from an all-out war on semiconductors, because an all-out war on semiconductors will not help anybody. It will hurt the innovation cycle. It can even hurt the industry to a point where it becomes a very non-innovative, non-interesting thing, and thing which has so much promise in 5 to 10 years may be relegated and pushed to the side and become like defense industry. And we are hoping that will not happen.
I want to ask about the R&D, research and development. What's the role of the R&D in driving the semiconductor industry forward, and how are the investments in the R&D evolving in response to the trade tensions or the ongoing projection?
Well, because the semiconductor industry has many aspects to that. We have material refining, we have equipment components, we have design, we have IP, we have fab manufacturing, we have package test, we have logistics. The R&D for each of these 7, 8, 10 aspects of the semiconductor industry has been a global collaboration. There's no one nation that can say that, okay, we have R&D of all these 7 areas and we have done very well. That's not the case actually. So R&D has been an extremely collaborative and a global. Now with the trade tension, what is going to happen is that is going to be disruptive, right? So we think that if the global R&D is disrupted, it will just slow down the semiconductor cycle and make it very expensive. If you think about that, a lot of the semiconductor innovation today is funded by taxpayers of US. Because in 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, through NSF, National Science Foundation, which is a educational grant giving, and then DARPA and ARPA, which are the two parts of US government, which fund research in the private sector. They funded most of the research. but they never put any restriction on that research, that you cannot use the research outside of United States. Neither did put any restriction on that research that you cannot publish that research worldwide. So the nation that funded that research for the last 30 years, up to, I will say, year 2000 or 2010, was mostly United States, some governments in Europe, and then Japan. Now, in the last 20 years, the situation has completely reversed. The majority of the funding, majority of the research is now coming from China. If you look at China, China produces more PhDs than the PhDs compared from the whole world together. China produces more research papers than whole world together. So this dramatic set of events is actually alarming to many people, that suddenly in last 20 years, world has gone from US, Europe, Japan doing bulk of the R&D funding and production. In just 10, 15 years, the situation has reversed itself. And now China is in the lead. They are doing bulk of the research. They are doing bulk of the funding. They are doing, producing most of the PhDs and papers. And so I think this is how the scenario has changed, even in semiconductors. That a lot of the research has moved into China because they have a much more coordinated system of thousands of labs, which no other country has. They have a much more coordinated system in education, a global plan. They have a nation plan, every 5-year plan. They can coordinate this better. So as a result, in the last 10, 15 years, China has got an upper hand in this research effort. Yet, they do not yet have a lot of innovative people. They do not have as many, disruptive ideas. So they still lack that, but they have the scale of research. So this is where we are seeing right now is that R&D is increasingly moving towards China. They are better organized to do this kind of research, and in all aspects of semiconductor, they are producing a lot of paper. They are producing, yet we do not see as much innovative work coming out of China. Still, that is being done in Europe, in United States, primarily in Japan. So it's a combination, changing landscape, but disruption to a global collaboration of R&D. I don't like to see China becoming dominant. I don't want to see US or Europe or Japan. I would like to see, like most people in my field, a collaboration which continues to be going across the boundaries, and we continue to share and continue to increase the productivity, efficiency, performance, cost structure of semiconductor. Unfortunately, that is not where it is headed. It's increasingly looking like that each country will not share their R&D with other countries. They'll put controls on that, what you can publish, what you cannot publish, what you can sell and buy from each and in technology, through export controls, CFIUS type of things. A lot of those things are happening. US is doing that. Very soon China will do that. Very soon Europe will do that. Then Japan will do that. Why? Because it's not possible that only one country does that. Very soon, for tit for tat, other countries will do that. Very soon we will have 5 or 6 clubs. They will have, all of them will have their own CFIUS. They will have their own export control, and we'll have to go through hoops if a company is global or is trying to do a work in between China, US, or Japan, or Europe, or some other country. And each country will have their own regulations, what you can export, what you can't, what you can share, what you can't share, what kind of R&D is publishable, what kind of R&D will make it very complicated, very difficult. In the end, may hurt the innovation cycle.
Thank you, Dr. Naveed. I would like to ask one last question, then we'll pass to the questions from the audience. In your opinion, what advice would you give to the businesses in the semiconductor industry looking to thrive in the rapidly changing and often uncertain environment?
Look, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I believe there is opportunity in everything. When there is peace, there's a lot of opportunity. When there is war, there's a lot of opportunity. A lot of people make money in wars, right? So I think this semiconductor splitting all over the world will have a lot of negative effects, which we talked about, but which will can also have a lot of positive effects for individuals. For example, let's say I'm a lawyer which advises companies how to handle export control and CFIUS. My business in US has seen 20x growth. Let's say I'm a company which uh, uh, tells Chinese government, or I tell Chinese companies how to build some chips that were not built in China. They built in United States and they are not available to China under export control. That company's valuation is going to go up in China. For example, equipment companies in China are just going through a huge growth because Chinese factory owners know that they cannot buy it from US, they have to buy it from Chinese equipment makers. So as a result, China, it's a huge benefit for Chinese equipment makers, right? So I think when such wars happen, the businesses which quickly adjust to the new reality, study the new reality, understand what are the new regulations, benefit from it. Ones who do not study it, do not pay attention, and are taken by the events are the ones which are hurt by that. So I would advise everyone to learn as much about it and work with lawyers, work with trade specialists, experts, and say, okay, we are here today. Where will we be in 5 years? How should the plan of this company, the training of the employees, the strategies in the company or in the nation should change, and the people who will adjust to that reality quickly put policies in place to work with the new reality will benefit. As I said, there is an opportunity in every situation. Uh, Ironically speaking, in war, on one side, people get hurt and die and things like that. But there are some companies who are supplying the weapons, some companies who are supplying the ambulances or stuff for the doctors, or things like that. So there is a dark side, and then there is the other side for every situation. Same thing in semiconductor war. In semiconductor war, there will be a lot of damage. In fact, we believe the damage will be very, very bad. It's severe damage to the world economy. But there will be opportunities for nations, opportunities. For example, some people in the United States are very happy this is happening. Why? Because they can see that now they can get money from the government, or they can create some new companies in US which they could not have done before. Right? Same thing, some people in China are jumping with joy because they had an equipment company. They were worth 1 billion, now it is worth 10 billion. They didn't change anything. Only the war made their valuation 10x. Some companies are selling 90 times revenue in China in equipment. So same thing will happen in US. If NVIDIA is making AI chips are very, very important everywhere else. And NVIDIA is the only one. And if there was some company in China which could have made the AI chip competitive with NVIDIA, now NVIDIA is now benefiting in US is because that company in China cannot sell in US. So NVIDIA should be very happy about that. Okay, trade tension got rid of my competitor. So I think my advice to companies, nations, individuals, people is study this trade war, surround yourself with experts, and law is very important, trade is very important component, commerce and understanding the supply chain and having a very deep knowledge of this industry is this is a very not a simple industry, complex industry. But if you understand it well, I believe there are a lot of opportunities for people who study these trends, equip themselves with this knowledge, and understand the policies and adopt strategies to work with this changing landscape.
Thank you very much. There's a question from the audience. Says Alibaba lost $20 billion market value recently due to the US sanctions. How will this affect other countries and how far can it go? This could be a way to keep US monopoly in the semiconductor market. What's your views on that?
$20 billion for Alibaba is nothing. It's zero, right? So I think 20, 30, 50, $100 billion shift in values in semiconductor industry is a small event that happened that will change because Alibaba doesn't have access to one kind of chips. 3 years from now, Alibaba will have those chips. Actually, one of the opinion we have is that to say that we are denying that country those chips, how valid is that statement? We believe that is not a valid statement. We believe that that country will either build those chips or get the access to the chips through other countries or other companies. So in a completely open world as we have today, denying access to certain technologies to countries and companies is literally impossible. And as a result, okay, so Alibaba lost $20 billion because they don't have access to certain technology. Alibaba might have that technology 2 or 3 years from today, and then their market cap may triple because now they not have just the technology, but they are the only one in China to have that technology. So the Chinese stock market may reward them even more by that. So I think you will see this, flip flop and changing fortunes over the next, decade, as some technologies are restricted and people make chips and then other people compete. So we'll see that happening. But I see in the long run, companies like Alibaba and others who put long-term strategy in place to ensure that they have the chips that they need for their current and future needs will do better than other companies who do not have such strategies and plans in place. I'm sure Alibaba has a robust plan. So does Microsoft. So does Nvidia, Google, Facebook. They're all worried about right now. If China stops selling certain low-end chips to US, what will we do? It will literally shut down our semiconductor industry in US. And same time, China is worried about the same thing. So I believe these kind of things will happen over the next 3 to 5, 10 years. And we'll have to absorb the shock as happens, but the shock will go away. Alibaba will overcome it. Nvidia will overcome it. Facebook will overcome it because there are multiple ways of solving a problem. So I consider these shocks as temporary shocks and not long-term shocks.
Thank you, Mr. Sherwani. Another question is about the EU. How do you see the efforts by the EU to attract semiconductor production capacity in comparison to the US and China? At first glance, the levels of the state and aid appear insufficient to stand a real chance to attract companies to start producing within the EU. So what do you think about the EU's attempts to attract semiconductor production?
I mean, actually, EU does have some very good companies. In Germany, in Dresden, there are several fabs that were originally part of AMD. Now they're part of Global Foundries. And many countries do very cutting-edge research. Switzerland, ETH, Spain, Barcelona, in Cambridge, US, France. There are many one of the big equipment company, ASML, is in Europe. So Europe actually has a pretty key place in the semiconductor supply chain already. It's not a dominant position, but it is very important position. For example, lithographic equipment company ASML, it's pretty dominant in the sense that the equipment they make is really not made by anybody else today. Not true, maybe 3 years from now, other people can make that equipment potentially, but today it is. So I believe Europe needs to put a plan together which is comprehensive by collaboration. Each country in Europe is not big enough to do that. That's why we have EU. So I think a EU level plan in which we say, okay, Germany will do this, Belgium will do this, France will do this, so on and so forth. Would a comprehensive plan has a better chance of success rather than each country trying to do on their own. First of all, they're not large enough. Secondly, by the way, I don't believe even US and China is large enough to do it. So it's not a matter of that. It's a matter of collaborating between the 13, 20 countries to work together to put a plan and then find allies in other regions that they can work and trust to build a more global supply chain to ensure that their companies and their people will have access to the semiconductor technology in the future. So I think I see each individual countries doing things, 5 billion here, 10 billion there, 20 billion there. But I think a EU level plan that sees collaboration between the countries, and then a plan to work with United States or Japan or whoever are their allies around the globe, that has a better chance of success than each country trying to, publishing something just because they want to attract their voters, or election in which they want to claim some victory in front of their people. Oh, we have a plan too. But if I'm in the semiconductor, if Spain has a plan of 5 billion, it is actually a meaningless plan. It doesn't really do anything in a global scheme of things. But if the voters in Spain do not understand that, they say, oh my God, look at our leaders. They are doing something amazing, $5 billion. But me and that a factory in this industry takes $25 billion to set up a single factory, a fab. So what is 5 billion do? Nothing, right? But you could, at a small nation level, you can score a lot of points in an election but it is not really meaningful. So my suggestion for EU or for US or for China or for anybody else is very simple. Focus on what you can do, form allies who you can form a strong bond with, and then see what you can do to secure the chips that you need to secure, and then work with global population with chips are not relevant to your security of your country. Because if you stop that, then overall cost of semiconductor goes up and the innovation stops.
Thank you very much, Professor Sherwani. I think it was very valuable and insightful contribution from your end. I would like to thank you to all the audience and all the people who joined us today, and hope to see you in the coming webinars.
Sure, it is I love coming to Turkey. It's a great place. Not only that, I think simply from an Islamic point of view, it is my opinion that it's probably the most industrialized, forward-looking country in the world. I think from the regional point of view as well, I think it's a growing power. I think Turkey should pay a lot of attention and consider semiconductors as an issue of sovereignty of Turkey, and try to build their own industry in collaboration with their allies worldwide to ensure that the Turkey's industries and people will have the semiconductor technology access to them. And so that does not become a barrier to the growth of Turkey. I wish all of you guys well. I wish Turkey as a nation well. I hope they put things in place where the semiconductor technology continues to play a very positive role in importance, quality of life, and industrial growth and things like that. But I think as a nation, Turkey and other nations to put plan in place. Otherwise, they will find out 5 years from now that they have been left behind, and it might hurt their economy or hurt their people or quality of life in those countries. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope audience felt we provided them some useful information. Our approach in these discussions is always be very neutral, educate everybody, and to make sure that we are not trying to bias the opinion of person one way or the other. Invite them, excite them, so they go search for more data, more knowledge, and become more knowledgeable and form their own opinions about this subject rather than being influenced by one party or the other. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Look forward to talking to you in future.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sherwani.
Thank you.